I wish it was that easy to get a promotion, man. You walk into the office, you pick up a gun, you're the director now. I don't think that's what will happen in America if you do that. Salutations, my friends, I'm TheMightyMander, and continuing on from where we left off, once we finished Quantum Break, I was really looking forward to getting back to a Remedy game that I'd actually played before and really enjoyed. And while I did initially get back into playing it pretty quick, it did take me a while to actually come up with something worth saying about it, which is why this video kind of took so long. I found that it didn't really leave as strong of an impression on me on a replay as the other games did on a first play. So it kind of just took me a while to gather my thoughts on the game, and now especially that Control Resonant has been announced, that got me super pumped up and really back into making this video. So without further ado, let's talk about Remedy's next game, one of their most famous games at this point, Control. Control is a third-person shooter released in 2019, developed of course by our dear friends at Remedy and published by 505 Games. They then released two expansions, The Foundation and AWE, both of which were released in 2020 and subsequently bundled into the Control Ultimate Edition. In Control, you play as Jesse Faden, a seemingly normal civilian who stumbles into a paranatural building in the heart of Manhattan in search of answers about her past, but ends up finding a lot more than that. Extra-dimensional plagues, labyrinthian architecture, temperamental household objects, one extremely cool Finnish janitor, and lots of redacted documents. That paranatural building is known as the Oldest House, an ancient shifting construct that now houses the titular Federal Bureau of Control. Jessie somehow finds her way into the Bureau, despite it being made pretty clear that regular civilians are not supposed to be able to do that. She then discovers that it's been taken over by a hostile resonance known as the Hiss, which has turned most of its employees into either floating corpses or the various enemies that you fight throughout the game. How do you fight these enemies? Well, Jessie fights with the weapon that she finds next to the body of the, very recently deceased director of the Bureau, Zachariah Trench, the legend James McCaffrey returning once again to play a new role. The service weapon at first sends Jessie into a trial of sorts to prove her worthiness. She comes out the other side and, surprise, she's the director now. So now she's got to get to know her staff, manage all the crises, and find out the Bureau's connection to what she's really looking for, which is answers about her brother Dylan, who has been missing since a supernatural event took place in the town that they both grew up in when they were kids. There's a lot going on here, and Control is so confident in its presentation. It is unapologetically weird and upfront about its weirdness in a way that past Remedy games aren't really. I feel like I generally had up to this point really taken it for granted how strange and unique this game is, especially for a kind of higher budget, higher presentation AAA game. I really enjoyed the game back in 2019, but I remember taking it for granted that it was probably just kind of par for the course for Remedy, not knowing as much about their full body of work as I do now. Like, yeah, they make weird, wacky shooters, and they made another weird, wacky shooter. But knowing the little more I do now about the struggles that this company has gone through to get their games out the door and into the hands of their audience, I now really appreciate just what a bold swing this game is. This game kind of establishes itself as the hub of the Remedyverse, where all the other properties then retroactively become the spokes. Everything now connects back to the weird place where the people investigate and document all the weird stuff. Let's talk about that confident presentation. I think the best example of it is quite simply when you get to a new location and the title splashes across the screen. It's like very matter of fact in its presentation. It's just like some white text that appears on the screen, but it's got like some very subtle sound design, and it just looks cool as hell. And the whole game feels like that. In the Quantum Break video, I described the overall Remedy style as kind of emerging as pairing realistic visuals and characters with extraordinary environments and scenarios, and Control takes that to new extremes. Look no further than the analog, post-war government feel of the Bureau itself and the brutal architecture of the Oldest House in its natural state, contrasted against the state of all that stuff when it's infected by the Hiss. The building is shifted, the people are contorted and infected by red light and goop. It's really eerie to see this office space that's supposed to be mundane and unassuming becoming this otherworldly nightmare. If you have a fear of liminal spaces, this game might get under your skin at some points. So while Alan Wake was more of a slower, horror-focused action game, and Quantum Break was a straight-up action game, Control kind of mixes both, with the straight-up action gameplay housed within a very supernatural, creepy world. The gameplay is very much shooter gameplay at its core. The service weapon starts out as a pistol, but you're able to craft new forms for it as you go, and it's all contained within the same weapon. You can get a machine gun form for it, a sniper form, a grenade launcher form, or my personal favorite, which is the shotgun. In addition to shooting, you also get several telekinetic powers, like a dash, a shield where you make a debris wall in front of you, a levitate ability, and the single best feeling throw in any game I have ever played. The weight of the pick up and throw attack just feels so right. Any object you see around that has a slight outline to it can be picked up and tossed at enemies. If an item isn't there to pick up, Jesse just picks up a chunk of rubble out of the wall or the floor. Hurling shit across a room with your mind has never felt better. All the powers, but particularly the throw move, kind of feeds into the loop of this game, which is you shoot until your ammo is exhausted or almost exhausted, you let it recharge, which it does automatically, and while it's recharging, you use your powers to either dispatch some more enemies by throwing them, taking them over with, what do they call it in the game? Seize. They call it seize, where you seize control of an enemy. You can also take that time to do some defensive moves like putting up the debris wall or dashing away to a safer location, and it all kind of feeds into this action loop that feels really, really satisfying once you got it down. It makes you feel like a superhero or a Jedi or a fucking anime protagonist, and it just, not many games feel like it to play. It is really incredible at its peak. I think that is because everything still feels weighty and grounded in an environment that feels realistic for as unnatural as it is. Like, there's a lot of games where you can pick shit up and throw it with your mind, but not much feels like you just like, you lift it up and it feels heavy and weighty, and the momentum of throwing it at an enemy feels lethal and very satisfying. Like, I think that is kind of the power that makes the whole game feel super satisfying. One of the signature features that I've noticed in all of Remedy's games so far is interactable and or destructible environments, and that feature is off the chart in Control. In addition to being able to pick up basically anything and throw it, explosions and gunshots send papers and rubble and particles flying everywhere in every environment. And the small details are still there too, like picking up a projector with the lift ability and pointing it all around the room while it's on will project whatever video is playing all around the room. And there are documents to read basically everywhere, from incident reports to employee messages to Easter eggs and notes that reveal major details of the story. I think this is the best utilization of in-game reading material that Remedy has demonstrated thus far, and by a significant margin. The only thing that comes close is the manuscript pages from Alan Wake. I thought those were very interesting, and then the stuff in Quantum Break was not as interesting to me, but now we're very much back with the redacted documents. I think they are all so interesting to read. But you aren't just reading stuff in this game either. Jessie also meets several surviving Bureau employees who become her allies in the various departments. It feels neat to encounter a bunch of characters who are really just trying their best to be competent at their jobs. Like, they're just good at shit, and they're personable, and they don't feel like annoying stereotypes. I like how Jessie immediately establishes a friendly rapport with Pope and Arish, and they kind of become her new inner circle of allies. Langston is a bit of a weirdo. He's like just that guy who's been at his very particular job for a little bit too long and knows everything there is to know about it, and just comes across a bit off-putting, but is generally a nice guy. I like him a lot. Same thing with Underhill. She's just a weirdo who's exceptionally good at her job and doesn't need the input of anybody else, and I like her as well. I think she's pretty entertaining. I like the subtle tension that develops between Jessie and Helen Marshall, how they don't really trust each other, but they obviously need to work together in order to resolve this crisis because it's more important than any kind of bureaucracy or politics within the Bureau. I like how characters like Trench and Dr. Darling have such an important role in the story despite never actually interacting with Jessie directly. Those two in particular I think are really interesting. They're two of the most interesting characters in the game, and they are played by Max Payne and Alan Wake respectively. And I think that's just super awesome. Zachariah Trench was the previous director, like I mentioned before, but is obviously now very, very dead. But he's still able to communicate with Jessie and explain plot and lore stuff via this weird cross-dimensional communication device called the Hotline. Dr. Darling was the head of research, and as a result, he does a lot of explaining of different terms and phenomena within the game via these instructional live-action videos. All this stuff is explained in-universe in a way that's cool and compelling and gives the player more information about the character, the world, or both. Speaking of live action videos, that is another recurring feature that Remedy uses to kind of flesh out their narrative. In this game, it is very much the instructional videos created by Dr. Darling, but there's also like a really weird children's puppet show that I think is created for the subjects within the Bureau, like Dylan, who was kept there since he was a child. And they're very creepy. I didn't do a ton of digging into them, but I know that they do reinforce a lot of the themes. The kind of darkness that's hidden beneath the surface of the Bureau, like the supernatural being presented in a way that's supposed to be palatable for a child that's being kept as an experiment, is kind of creepy. I don't quite know what's going on here. Getting back to the characters within the game itself, though, there is also Emily Pope, who is one of the first major characters that you meet, and I like her a lot. She was a research assistant to the head researcher, Dr. Darling, and now under Jesse is kind of stepping into the role of the head of research, being Jesse's main point of contact throughout the game, doing a lot of research on the different Hiss enemies. If you look at the documentation on the different enemies, it's actually all written by Emily, which is super cool. The relationship between these two is very cool. It is a stark departure from past Remedy games in terms of developing compelling female characters. That was one of my criticisms of past games. Not a major criticism, considering that the bar is on the floor for that sort of thing in video games, just something that I thought could be slightly better in the future. But in Control, it's miles better, which is awesome, and I think it deserves to be highlighted. And then there's Ahti, who is simply the best character in the whole game. The very incredibly finished janitor who is also something else? I have no clue what his true nature is, but he is awesome. And he seems really important, like, to the overall Remedy universe. Like, the FBC staff think they know what's up with the oldest house, but something tells me that Ahti really knows what's up. Like, I think there's a reason he took the form of the janitor who knows everything and holds all the keys. Like, you know, I picture Ahti with his big key ring to every strange door in the oldest house, like the keymaker from The Matrix or something, you know what I mean? Just a guy who has all the answers and knows way more than he's ever willing to divulge at any given time. Like, Jesse has an inner monologue that chimes in a lot, especially early in the game, and Ahti can just hear it. Like, he responds to one of Jesse's inner thoughts early in the game, and it kind of just makes you go like, wait, what?
Ahti the janitor is a friendly face in my book.
Better than somebody with no face at all. Think about it. No face.
It's just one of those moments where it makes you realize that there's something else going on with this guy. And it's very cool. Very cool moment early on in the game that just clues you in that there's a lot more going on here. The first time I replayed this game for this video, shortly after I finished the Quantum Break video, I kind of blitzed through it because I just wanted to levitate. I remember that mechanic really opening up the game and the game not really feeling complete until that ability is unlocked. To an extent, I guess that's true. The game is at its best when you have a whole suite of abilities, for sure. But having gotten to the end of that first initial replay and been a little bit unsatisfied when I got to the end, I started over and really started to exhaust the dialogue of all the characters as I encountered them, because they will move to different locations throughout the story and their situations will kind of evolve. So it really helps to get more context for the situation when you exhaust all the dialogue for each character as you encounter them, because some of that dialogue is unique to the situation that they're in. The world building is also on another level in this game. Control is very good at introducing interesting concepts without over-explaining them. That hotline device I mentioned earlier, that thing is also used to contact you by some sort of entity called the Board. I can't believe I haven't even mentioned the Board yet. The Board, represented by this inverted black pyramid, is an extra-dimensional being or a panel of extra-dimensional beings who is also your boss and speaks in a low, bassy warble translated into very corporate-sounding sentences with actual double-speak terms all over the place. Like, the Board will say shit to you, but mean two different things, and those two different things will be in the dialogue. It's a very strange concept, but it actually makes a ton of sense for kind of what the Board represents in this game, which is the unseen powers that be at the head of any kind of corporation or government entity or creative team or anything like that. Someone's always controlling all the levers, someone's always controlling all the numbers, and sometimes they'll say one thing and mean another thing. And this game takes that and applies it very literally to this entity that is controlling the operations of the FBC, which is known simply as the Board. The board controls the service weapon and the astral plane where all of the tests take place, and presumably the architecture of the oldest house itself? I don't really know, because they aren't really super involved in the main plot of the game. Speaking of the main plot, notice how I haven't really talked about it all that much? About Jesse, about Dylan, about their backstory in a town very pointedly named Ordinary? That's because the main plot is one of the less interesting parts of the game. Most of the main plot, I would say half to about 2/3, is following the paper trail that leads you to Dylan, who eventually decides to just kind of walk into your base, which is a neat little twist. But the Hiss storyline and the Dylan storyline, which are kind of intertwined, aren't really resolved by the end of the game. By the time the credits roll in this game, there's a pretty significant lack of resolution to the main plot. Its world building, its setting, its characters, its gameplay, all those things are on fire in Control, but it just doesn't really have a super compelling through line in the form of a main plot. It feels more interested in really establishing the persistent shared universe that is the Remedyverse, rather than being a super compelling singular story, which I think is fine. It just comes with some compromises, though I think that the strengths ultimately do outweigh the weaknesses in this game. However, now I'm going to briefly talk about the DLC of this game, because I think it does a lot to address this criticism. Specifically, the Foundation DLC, I think, is very, very good. The Foundation adds a lot of lore that is specific to Control. It elaborates a lot on the FBC, the board, and the origins of the oldest house. It has a contained plot with stakes that feel a lot more compelling than the main game, because it actually puts Jesse in a difficult position as the director. So the Bureau is in a lot of danger in the Foundation DLC, and Jesse, as the new director, has to directly deal with it. And she actually struggles with a lot of the responsibilities that have been thrust upon her, because it is a lot for one person to take on. And Jesse hasn't really mastered the art of delegation yet. She really feels like she has to do everything herself. And that kind of only amplifies the pressure that she feels as, the person responsible for dealing with this situation. And she doesn't have any of the super experienced inner circle of the Bureau around to help her, with Trench dead, Darling still missing, and Marshall disappearing halfway through the main game to pursue the issue that is at the center of the Foundation. I found myself a lot more motivated to actually solve the problem in the Foundation. I was like, oh shit, this is dangerous and this has to get dealt with, rather than just kind of wandering around the SCP funhouse that is the main game, The Foundation also has one of the best sequences in the whole game alongside the Ashtray Maze. But it also represents the kind of duality of this game and where some of my problems start to form. Like, this sequence in the Foundation is impeccably visually crafted, and it has amazing sound design, and it's such a cool spectacle. But sometimes, like, the really annoying Radiant quests will pop up in the middle of a really exciting sequence and kind of break your flow a little bit. Or if you happen to die in a sequence like this, like I did, it doesn't just immediately let you retry and get you back into the action. It spawns you back at a checkpoint and has you find your way back there, which navigation is also an issue that a lot of people have with this game. It just kind of gets in its own way sometimes with the way it's designed. It can get in the way of the really, really fun creative stuff by sticking to this rigid structure of sort of being half open world. Like, sometimes when you have something really cool to show me, I think it's okay to railroad me a little bit. Shut the Bureau alerts off and just have me respawn right at the beginning of the cool musical sequence when I die. Like, I feel like that would just help the pacing a lot of sequences like this. That's definitely a nitpick though. A lot of my problems with this game are nitpicks. Speaking of which, the other DLC also has a nitpick. So the other DLC, the AWE DLC, Altered World Event, or Alan Wake expansion, I don't think it's nearly as good as the Foundation, but I think it is a great teaser for Alan Wake 2. As soon as I heard Alan's voice talking to me through the hotline in that manuscript narration, I was like, oh, we're back. Oh, we're so back. And it is also very cute that they integrated the flashlight mechanic from Alan Wake into the gameplay of Control. I think that's kind of fun. But this DLC also shares some of the fundamental problems that I had with Alan Wake, which is that you got your horror game in my action game. The restrictions of Alan Wake do not work in Control. Stop taking away my one resource that I have to do everything except for shoot. I can't use any of my defensive options or offensive options when my ammo's out. That sucks. That's not fun. It's just not, stop taking away the thing that makes the game fun. So while we're here, I want to just briefly go over some of my other problems with this game. Minor problems. I do have an occasional problem with getting lost or stuck. Navigation is difficult in this game. I don't think it has the best map, but it does have very good signage. but just, good signage only does so much. Sometimes it feels like I'm going the right direction according to the map, but then I'll hit a wall and find out that I'm on the wrong level vertically and I'm actually 2 floors below where I need to be in order to get to where I need to go. It happens more than I'd like, but ultimately I think it is a manageable issue because the signage is very good, and once you unlock the different fast travel points, it is very accommodating and lightning fast. It's instant if you're in the same overall area and just traveling to different points within it. I also don't like the mod system for weapons and abilities. I think that should all have been maintained within the skill point system, and I think that maybe the weapons should have had their own skill point system rather than the mod system that they have, because grinding for resources, I don't think adds anything to this game. And I don't think that the upgrades, the ability mods need to be randomly generated with such frequency. None of them really feel like they make enough of a difference to really affect the gameplay in any significant way. With the rare exception of okay, there are mods that you can stack on top of the shotgun configuration for the gun that let you load it up with more projectiles, right? That's cool. That makes the shotgun feel really devastating when you're up close to an enemy and they eat all those projectiles, right? So that's very cool. But I think that maybe there could have just been an upgrade tree within the shotgun path where it's okay, do you want more range or do you want more pellets? And you could have used a skill point to do that. I think that there was a more traditional action game structure that they could have found here that I think would have worked better than ultimately the loot system and the resource system that kind of ended up in this game. Some resources that are limited to certain areas, incentivizing you to hunt them down like a side objective, maybe, but that feels kind of like an RPG mechanic. I just don't think every action game needs RPG mechanics, and certainly not this one. The Radiant quests that I briefly mentioned before also kind of fit into this. The bureau alerts, they happen very randomly. Sometimes they'll throw off your momentum if you feel obligated to go do them, which they don't really make any difference if you don't do them either, so I don't really get what the purpose of them is. A couple of more focused side quests that really dealt with Jessie coming to terms with her new responsibilities as director, rather than feeling like a very vague general sense of pressure that you as the player kind of feel by having all these side objectives pop up. I think I'm giving that too much credit if I assume that was on purpose to make me feel like I'm being overwhelmed as the director, just as Jessie would. I don't know if that's what they're going for, and I don't really think that it comes across that way if that is what they were going for. I think hunting down the altered items for Langdon is a better example of this. There's just enough, it still feels very fetch questy, but there's just enough variety in the way that the objects are presented and the weird shit that each of them do and the way they're documented. That feels a little bit better as oh, this is some shit that I have to do now that I'm the director. But like I said, those are mostly minor criticisms. The only major criticism I have of this game is the main story doesn't really lead to any kind of exciting conclusion. But that's because all the elements of an exciting conclusion are there. I just don't think that they come together in a way that they could have. We're getting a lot of information revealed to us in these last few missions about where Jessie came from and how she relates to the Bureau. And so it feels like we are leading to something. I don't quite know what it would be, but it really feels like we are leading to a big conclusion somehow. And I think that's what they try. I just don't think it comes across as particularly satisfying. So in the last mission, after Dylan has escaped from his captivity, you have to go into the astral plane, shut off the slide projector, which is the gateway that allowed the hiss in, and free Dylan, who is the person that she's been looking for this entire time. So Jessie shuts off the slide projector, frees Dylan from the hiss, or attempts to, and then we get credits. And that's it. And then we're sent back to the hub area where we find out that Dylan is safely back in captivity, but he is in a coma and can't talk. But the hiss are still everywhere. And I think this is the big problem I have with the game, because it reads to me as a half attempt to be a living game with Radiant quests and a lot of replayability. But genuinely, I think it might be better if we were given a conclusive ending where we stopped the hiss invasion, and then to continue gameplay and do side quests, we're sent back to a save before you did the final mission. I don't necessarily love when games do that either, but I think that might be better than what we have here. You could still set up a sequel, put Dylan in a coma. I think that would be a good, subversion of the expectation that you would rescue him. Say, oh, the hiss are still out there, they might be back, even though we shut off the slide projector. I think that still sets up a sequel pretty well. But this game not ending after the credits kind of undercuts its narrative conclusion in a big way, at least in my opinion. Although I'll definitely admit that this feeling of emptiness and dissatisfaction with the ending of this game it's not nearly as bad now that the first trailer for Control Resonant has come out. That is what really kicked me back into gear and really motivated me to continue on with these videos, because I'm like, we're playing as Dylan now. Dylan fights with melee instead of guns. The melee weapon is not the service weapon. It's something different called the Aberrant. Is Dylan out of his coma? Has the hiss and the mold and everything else from within the Bureau escaped into Manhattan? Or is Dylan still in his coma and this is somehow all still happening within the oldest house and he's just hallucinating everything? Is Jessie still the director? Is she in the game? Are they actually the same person? Will I understand more if I play Alan Wake 2? Probably. I really have no idea about any of these questions. And the best part is, once I finish up Control, I will have a whole other Remedy game to dive into to make the wait for Resonant a little easier. I don't want to overshadow the first game with sequel hype. I think Control is excellent. It has a confident style, a great cast of characters, fun shooting, even more fun telekinesis powers, and a rich, developed setting that establishes itself as the foundation for a connected universe that is one of the best, most creative things happening in gaming right now. I may have a few problems with it, but my affinity has grown with each subsequent playthrough, and I cannot wait for Alan Wake 2 and Resonant to see what they have to add to this overall story. That's all I have for now. As always, I've been the Mighty Mander. I hope you all are staying safe out there, taking care of yourselves. I love you all very much. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out, my friends. See, I've got another thematically appropriate shirt. Got my Night Springs. I'm really excited for Alan Wake 2, dog.